My name is Mike Burns. I'm the Vice President of the Florida Veterans for Common Sense. Our President, Gene Jones, is in Colorado. Hi, Bob. So I want to welcome everybody here, and this is a great turnout. It's a very important talk from one who knows. If I can introduce our speaker for this evening. I told him a little while ago, reading through his bio, I know Dan for many years, but I didn't know he was on every single major nonprofit in Florida. But anyway, I think it's good to hear it. He's a lawyer, practiced here for 52 years. He has served as General Counsel to the Sarasota Manatee Airport Authority, previously served as Primary Counsel for Sarasota Memorial Hospital and the Sarasota County Clerk of Court. He is currently on the governing board of the Patterson Foundation, previously served either as President or as Chairman of the Sarasota chapter of the American Red Cross, the United Way of Sarasota County, the Sarasota Tiger Bay Club, Gulf Coast Kiwanis, Sarasota County Bar Association, the William C. and Marie Selby Foundation, SCOPE, which is Sarasota County Openly Plans for Excellence, the Sarasota County Civic League, and the Corporate Council of Ringling College of Art and Design. He has served several terms as chairman of trustees and deacons at First Baptist Church, and he was also a big brother. Dan is a sixth generation of Floridian. Let's give a big welcome to Dan Bailey.
Thank you, Mike. Mike's been a friend of mine for a long time. I think I first met him when he first came to Sarasota, after he had served quite some time in the military and here and abroad, as you know. And he's one of my heroes. Jim Dearman I've known for about 54 years, I think. We were in law school together. He was a year ahead of me, but just a dear friend, and a number of others of you are friends of mine as well, some of whom I don't see here tonight, who I knew are in this organization. Gene Jones has been a friend for almost 50 years. I guess I want to talk to you a little bit about Sarasota Memorial Hospital. It's something I'm very close to. I no longer serve as their primary counsel. I still do all of their zoning work, land use, entitlement for all their various projects. But it's always been a wonderful institution. My first glance at the hospital was when we moved here from Miami, which we pronounced Miami for some reason, in 1957, and we moved into a house located where Cape Surgery is, I started to say is now located, but it's been torn down recently, and a new building going up there on Waldemere Street. I wanted to be born in Sarasota, but I wanted to be near my mother on the day I was born, and she was in Jacksonville. But I got here as soon as I could, and I would have been born at Sarasota Memorial had I been here. Three of my four children were born in Sarasota Memorial, and three of my grandchildren also. Our law firm began representing the hospital in 1955 or 6. As you may know, the hospital is an independent special district. It does have an elected board. It does have taxing power. The airport authority that I also represent is a special district. It lacks taxing power. It doesn't really need it, though. It's a big cash register right now. It's very busy. The hospital board is elected, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But I largely wanted to brag a little bit about the institution and let you know how well it's doing. I suspect most of you have been following its progress. It's been a long time growing to its present size, but my senior partner, Bill Harrison, who sadly passed away about 3 years ago, was General Counsel for both the airport and the hospital when he was about 28 or 29 years old. And he served in that capacity up until about 2004. And he had such a love for the hospital. Hospital was founded in 1925, same year our law firm was. So we celebrate our 75th anniversary together, the hospital and our law firm and the Sarasota Herald Tribune. When the Herald Tribune was a little bit bigger operation than it currently is. But and then one of my law partners, Caroline Kalish, left our law firm and transitioned to become the chief legal officer for the hospital a few years ago. So she has actually an in-house staff there. So our work is more limited. We do their corporate work, their employment law work, and then of course the entitlement work, the zoning work that I do. I do have a PowerPoint that I'm going to ask to be projected up to the screen here momentarily. And this will give you a little bit of an indication of the dimensions of the healthcare system. It used to be the hospital, but now it's referred to as a healthcare system because it has a couple of hospitals and a number of other facilities located not only in Sarasota but also in Manatee County. A few years ago, we got the legislature to amend the Enabling Act to allow the hospital to operate in Manatee County. So it has a few facilities up there, no hospital, and also we're not permitted to use any of the tax money collected in Sarasota County for any facilities in Manatee. This first slide does emphasize that the hospital system is about 100 years old. We now have 2 hospitals. I'll be showing you those. If you haven't seen the one down in Venice, if you go down the interstate, you'll see at Law Road this enormous structure looming on the landscape there. And we have quite a story I'll tell you about that hospital. So we have a network of outpatient facilities, urgent care facilities. I'll show you a map shortly about where they're located. We also have a new behavioral health hospital. You remember Baycare on the on the west side of Osprey near the hospital. It was there for so long. It used to be a nursing home, and then the hospital bought it and made it a mental health facility, and it was somewhat lacking in amenities, shall I say. So now there's a new one that's going up across the street from it. If you drive down Osprey Avenue, you look over to the east, you'll see this beautiful building that's just opened a few months ago. The hospital is the only one in Sarasota County that has a trauma center. We thought for a long time that we didn't have enough knife fights or car accidents to justify a trauma center, but we apparently do now, and we have that available. We have obstetrics, maternity services, a large number of babies born every day in that hospital. We have newborn intensive care. I had one of my grandchildren had to stay in that facility for 2 weeks after she was born, and we were so grateful for it. And then it's an enormous economic driver, a big employer, and I'll show you the numbers in just a moment. Well, on your screen right now are 8 faces. There are actually 9 positions. There's 1 vacancy currently. And you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, Patricia Maria, I guess it's pronounced, was elected 2 years ago, and she's one of the folks who is part of the medical freedom group that we'll talk about shortly. And then over on the left side, Bridget Florucci is another. And then down at the bottom, Victor Roy is also. So there are three of them that were elected last time, and we'll be talking a little bit about that. And then the upper left-hand corner, Sarah Lodge is the current chair, and she's up for re-election. She's one of the folks on the ballot now. These are some of the accolades that the hospital has received, and it's been getting similar accolades, for the last 15 years at least. The only one in Florida to earn the highest 5-star quality rating from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, and has been doing that since 2016. It's received A grades from the so-called Leapfrog group since 2016. U.S. News and Reports has given it, named it one of the top hospitals for 20 different types of care. They break it down into different specialties. And the 50 best list, I guess nationally, and the Nursing Rehab Center was named U.S. News Top Nursing Home. And then Newsweek has named it among the world's best hospitals, from 2019 through the current time. And then it's the only one in the region to earn the Magnet recognition, which is fewer than 1% of the hospitals in the country receive that ranking. So there's a lot of bragging rights to it, and it's so gratifying to see it happen because we've all known it's been a good institution, and it's been, watching it evolve over the years to be from just one little location and a very conventional hospital with providing services only for inpatients and a little bit of emergency room, to watching it become an actual system that serves the 2 counties. Actually, it serves more than 2 counties because people from Charlotte and DeSoto, of course, come over here too. We have some big numbers. Sarasota Memorial currently has, it shows here, the upper left-hand corner, it shows 10,000 employees. I actually heard this morning, I actually heard this from the airport director who said that the hospital actually has 10,500 employees. And they're looking for 1,000. They have 1,000 openings right now. So it is a big economic driver in this community. And that next one, it shows the number of babies that have been delivered, 4,600 this year. And every time one's born, you hear bells go off and lullabies sung up and down the hall. It's quite a thing. And then they have 580 physicians and providers. That includes probably the physician's assistants who are part of the First Physicians Group. That's one of the big medical groups in town, and the hospital is the owner of it. And they provide services not simply in the hospital, but they staff the outpatient facilities and urgent care, and they're just a fine group of doctors and other providers. And we had 172,400 visits to 3 different emergency rooms. There are 2,500 medical staff members. Now, medical staff members, the doctors, can be on more than one staff. A lot of these doctors are also over at Doctors Hospital, and some of them were down at Venice Regional when it was still around. And then 31,300 surgeries are performed annually. I've only been a patient for surgeries a couple of times, a little knee injuries and those kind of things, but they treat you pretty good there, I'll tell you. And then 1.7 million patient visits annually. And I don't know, I think that may include the First Physicians patients as well as the regular hospital patients. Over 1,000 licensed beds. that's at the two hospitals, the one in the main campus in Sarasota and the one down in Venice. And they have a slew of volunteers. You see those people pushing wheelchairs around the hospital, 700 of them that are doing and providing various services at the hospital. And this is showing the growth in both outpatient, that's that bold line at the top, registrations, and inpatient. So a funny thing happened a few decades ago. You thought of the hospital as being a place you had to go stay overnight, but the vast majority you'll see here of the treatments are administered as an outpatient basis. And things that used to require 2 or 3 days in the hospital with a surgery, now they send you home within a few minutes after your surgery. So it's a much more efficient operation. So, but you can see the growth trends here. This is from fiscal year 2017 through 2023, and it's upward on both of those metrics. It shows you the how that has continued, and this is symptomatic, obviously, of the growth in population in Sarasota. As I say, I've lived here since 1957. I've seen a lot of growth, and there's been a surge post-pandemic. At the airport, it's just unbelievable what's happening out there. We just can't keep up with it, and the same is true here. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but when we get down to talking about Venice Hospital, one of the slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happened down there. This shows that growth in staff that I had mentioned, and this is showing, if you look at 2024, you'll see that 10,000 figure that I told you a moment ago is more like 10,500 now. So it has just continued to grow, and it's been a real difficult thing to recruit staff, primarily because of the housing issues, affordable housing problems. A lot of our staff comes in from adjacent counties, Charlotte County, drive up, and that's why when Venice was open, a lot of those people in Charlotte County were so grateful that they could actually work in Venice a little bit closer to home. Forbes ranked the hospital best larger employer among the best large employers in the U.S. and #1 health employer in Florida. And Newsweek listed the hospital system as the greatest workplaces for women in 2024. And that's no accident, because you look around, the main campus hospital is run by a woman. The Venice Hospital is run by a woman. The chief legal officer is a woman, and almost her entire staff is. So they serve us well, and so it's a great place to work, especially for women. And this shows you how the lengths that the hospital goes through to recruit physicians. And by the way, physicians also have difficulty with housing. When you recruit somebody fresh out of residency to come here, you know, they have a hard time finding a house that they can afford. Didn't used to be that way, but it sure is now. So one thing that the hospital has done is partner with FSU Med School. I don't know how many of you know, but FSU has a very fine med school, and they have a program that has their freshmen and sophomores on the Tallahassee campus, but when they get to be juniors or seniors, they are dispatched to one of, I think it's 6 different campuses around the state, one of which is in Sarasota. Used to be down there, downtown, but they don't spend much time on that at that office. Because they're around town, following physicians around and learning how to be doctors. And then after they get out of med school, Sarasota Memorial has opportunities for them to serve as residents. And I have to give David Verinder, the CEO of the hospital, great credit for that. He was very visionary, and he thought that would be a good way to keep some of those, to get some of those doctors out of med school to come to Sarasota, and that has in fact worked. You'll see the other part of that slide shows about half the physicians who have completed training in the program, which only began in 2017, have chosen to remain with Sarasota Memorial. So it's like a fraternity rush. I mean, you get them indoctrinated a little bit to Sarasota, and they don't have much opportunity to look around and really enjoy the amenities of Sarasota because they're working so hard. But occasionally they'll look up and see the Siesta Beach and Lido, and they say, you know, this may be a place I might want to come back to and bring my family. And that has, in fact, happened. And those who don't come here, 70% of them, at least, have remained in the state of Florida. So we're able to keep that talent here. I mentioned First Physicians Group, 580 physicians and providers. That includes nurse practitioners and physician assistants. And they are practicing in 63 different locations around the region. And just last year, 200 joined, and a wide range of specialties that you'll see up there on that slide, and OBGYN and internal medicine, pediatrics, family practice, some of those areas that we really desperately need additional physicians. Slide number 10, mock-up of the downtown campus, and I wish this were a little bit bigger. This is the campus I'm most familiar with because I've seen it all my life. And I've been involved in helping the hospital get their building permits and zoning approvals on just about everything you see here over the last 40 years. Hawthorne Street used to run right through where the middle of the campus is now. I have had to vacate 3 different segments of Hawthorne Street over the years as hospital projects have come along. The first one was for Aldermere Tower, and then for Courtyard Tower in the middle there, and then for that parking garage, that west parking garage at the top of your map there, we had to vacate the last of those segments. And then each one of the, we have 4 different, actually 5 different parking garages now. At one point, the city was a little bit concerned about the growth of the hospital, that it was going to, you know, before it realized its manifest destiny, it was going to be occupying Southside Village. So we basically carved out what the campus would be and created a special zoning district, the SMH zoning district, which is designed just for hospital buildings. It acknowledged the fact that we had some buildings that were within setbacks because the zoning code had changed over the years, and they sort of grandfathered us in for those setbacks. They prescribed, they let us go higher, because you know hospital buildings have to have very high ceilings, and right above the ceilings you have a space up there that's got to be 2 or maybe 4 feet in height for all the pipes and wires and all that go through there. So we have to have extra height, but then they require us to bring that height down lower as we get closer to the residential neighborhoods, like over on Osprey Avenue. So we've been able to live with that and stay within our boundaries. But we've got a lot of new buildings going up, even as I speak. And fortunately, the Venice Hospital has relieved a little bit of the pressure on this campus, as well as all the other outlying urgent cares and other facilities that we have scattered around the 2-county area. The Cornell Behavioral Health Pavilion, this is the one I spoke of a moment ago, across the street from where the old Bayside facility was located. And I had a friend from high school who was a Navy veteran, and he had some mental health issues, and I had to get him into Bay Care probably about 15 years ago. And that was my only exposure to that sort of thing, and it was kind of a sad place. But this new facility here is top-notch. It really is. we have Mike Burns and I have a friend, Carrie Seidman, who writes for the newspaper on Sundays. She's a big advocate for mental health care, and she went on a tour of this facility, and she just couldn't believe the beauty of it and how functional it's going to be and how exciting it is and how well it's going to be staffed. And it's going to have programs for geriatric, acute, adult, child, adolescent patient populations. And it's really a marvelous thing for our community to finally have something like that. This is the new Research and Education Institute, which is located where doctors' gardens used to be. If you remember that old it was very modernistic, built in late 50s, I believe. And it was a condominium, a medical condominium. So the hospital was able to buy units in there to a point where it wound up owning all of them, and then it tore the building down and has this building going up, and it's going to be opening in 2025, and it's going to house all the training programs, research programs. The hospital board will have a meeting room in here, and it has its own parking garage as well. The Millman Covert Cancer Pavilion. This is going up on that site I mentioned to you earlier where the Cape Surgery was located and where Dan Bailey lived when he was 11 years old for a brief time. And this is outpatient cancer treatment. Right across the street is the Jellison building that's for inpatient cancer treatment. So relieve a little pressure on Moffitt, for example. People can get cancer treatments here in town, both inpatient and outpatient. And it's going to be opening in 2025. This is a view looking at the hospital kind of from the back side from the interstate. But in Venice, many of you know that there was Venice Regional. Venice Regional was a not-for-profit in its early life, and it sold probably 30 years ago to Bon Secours, as a Catholic hospital chain. And the money from that went into funding the community foundation. It used to be called the Venice Foundation, and then it changed its name to the Gulf Coast Community Foundation. That money, that's a healthcare legacy foundation funded from the proceeds of that old hospital. So anyway, that hospital then changed hands and fell into a couple of different for-profit corporations. And Sarasota Memorial attempted to go down there and compete with it, but the city of Venice was not very welcoming to us. The Venice Regional didn't want any competition down there, and we had a little difficulty getting any zoning approvals. When we'd go down there and try to get zoning approvals, Venice Regional would send their lawyer there and try to disrupt our efforts. And the city commission was very supportive of Venice Regional because it was one of the biggest employers in town, and also was paying taxes. And then Venice Regional ran into some quality issues. You may recall reading about that at some point. And that convinced the city fathers and mothers that maybe they ought to let another hospital come in and compete. So once that happened, Venice Regional decided they were going to leave the city of Venice and move out to the east. And they found a parcel out by Jacaranda. The neighbors out there didn't want a hospital, the residential neighbors, and they fought it. But the county commission did ultimately approve that, a rezoning for that, but attached some pretty difficult conditions to it, road improvements, that kind of thing. And at that point, Venice Regional, for some reason, just packed up and left. And when they closed without a great deal of notice. And when that happened, it created a real surge on our hospital, which by this time was opened. So getting our hospital open, once the city council members decided they wanted to have us there, they did it in a big way. They really were welcoming to us. They moved heaven and earth to get us there, and even changed their zoning code to allow us to accelerate our construction before we even got site plan approval. So we opened it, I'm thinking in 2019, somewhere along in there, and it was immediately full. And we had a phase two, a second wing planned, but we didn't think we were going to have to do it for a long time. Well, we had to do it immediately. And that wing is the one you see coming out at you in this image on the left side there. And that opened last month, several floors of it, and it was filled up immediately too. So the other thing that happened in Venice, in addition to Venice regional closing, we had this hurricane, Ian. It created such damage down in Charlotte County that all those people started coming up to Venice Hospital, and so we might have to add another wing on again soon. This also has a medical office building on it. It has an emergency room, emergency center that you'll see out to the right of the image here. And if you look out at the extreme right, you'll see under construction an expansion, a 30,000 square foot expansion of that emergency center already. But this is on property that was purchased when I was the primary counsel for the hospital. It's 65 acres. And as I remember, it cost us something like $25 million. But we didn't do anything with it for the longest time. But its time did come, and here it is serving us so well. It has plenty of room on it for additional expansion, and it's right there at the intersection of Pine Brook and Laurel Road and I-75, real easy to get to. This shows you a map that you probably can't read from your seat in the back of the room, but it shows you how far and wide is the reach of Sarasota Memorial. At the top of your image there, you'll see one of the healthcare urgent care centers at Heritage Harbor up north of State Road 70, 64, I forget, 64, isn't it? Yeah. And then there's one under construction on State Road 70. There's one under construction at Lorraine Road in the Sarasota County portion of Lakewood Ranch. There's an existing one on University Parkway. And one of the great things, this happened just a few years ago, Newtown in Sarasota had been in need of clinical services for the longest time. And we were able to establish a facility up there, and it's on 27th Street and Osprey Avenue. And it's going gangbusters. It's been a wonderful lift for that community. And then we built one on St. Armands, which serves not only St. Armands and Lido, but also Longboat. That's the closest facility there is for them. And then we've had one on Bee Ridge for quite some time. We have one down on Clark Road at the Care Center East tract. That was, I think, I'm going to say 85 acres. It was purchased 30 years ago. It doesn't have much on it yet, but it's got a lot of potential for growth. There's also one down at Stickney Point Road. There's been one for a long time down at Blackburn Point Road. There's one down at Venice Bypass as you're coming into Venice. The bypass splits off to your left as you're coming into Venice from the north. There's a facility right there, urgent care. And then we have also facilities planned. Well, we have one down in Northport. And I don't know how much you know about Northport, but it's bigger than the city of Sarasota now. In fact, its boundaries, square footage or square miles are bigger than some states, I think. It's an enormous city. A lot of it's still very rural, but it's in the city. And they had been on us to put a hospital down there for a long time, but the problem was there were a lot of residents down there, but there weren't very many residents who are doctors practicing down there. You have to have a cluster of doctors that will service that hospital. Well, we think we're there now, and we have 2 sites selected, one or the other, or maybe both. One of them's at Sumter and I-75. As you know, Sumter is one of the main roads coming into Northport, and it comes into that Heron Creek area, and where the city hall is located, police department. And then we also have one over at Welland Park. We have a tract of land over there that might be suitable. We're trying to, unfortunately, both of them have a big wetland in the middle, like a hole in a donut. It couldn't be worse. They couldn't be placed in a worse location. So we're having to work around those wetlands. But we have plenty of acreage upland from that, and I think we're going to be able to get those hospitals established in the coming years. So that's how vast the system is, and it really is operating well, and it's something that it really ought to be a source of community pride for all of us. Now, we have an election coming up. I've been asked to talk about that. I'm going to talk about it very carefully. I just give you, not indoctrinate you, just kind of give you the facts. But we have 4 seats that are open. And perhaps some of you have read about this medical freedom group that 3 of whom, as I mentioned earlier, did get elected to the board 2 years ago. And one of the first things they did, some of them had concerns about how the hospital handled COVID, the masking requirements, the isolation requirements, the vaccines, all that kind of thing. Hospital was trying its best to follow the federal guidelines, and these folks felt like some of those guidelines were a little intrusive. So they when they got on the board, those board members and a number of members of the public asked the hospital to do some kind of analysis of that situation. And they did, the hospital did undertake a study of it, and it turned out that the results that our hospital got were above what the norm was around the state and around the country, the response. And honestly, it was a difficult time. You all lived through it. You know what it was like. And those healthcare providers were doing the best they could, trying to figure out what they're supposed to do next and how to keep people safe. So anyway, that group has now fielded, we know 4 candidates, 1 for each of those seats. And there's a 5th candidate who's also seemingly aligned with that group that's running for one of those 4 seats too. The elections coming up, qualifying period is June 10 through 14. So I guess it's possible that there could be some additional candidates beyond those that we know about right now. On August 20, there will be a Republican primary. I say Republican. If another additional Democrats jump in, there could be a need for a Democratic primary. I'm not really sure how that'll work. I can talk a little bit about the political parties. During my tenure, when I was really active at the hospital, it was all Republicans on the board, but we had, except one term, we had a Democrat got elected. So it is possible for a Democrat to get elected. It's happened in the past, and it happened at a time when the county was predominantly Republican registration. I've always made the observation that a good number of the Republicans in Sarasota were Democrats where they came from, and they figured out that they had to be Republicans to get to vote here. But in any case, it is possible for a Democrat to get elected, and you have 4 aspiring Democratic candidates now. And then the general election will be November 5. I'm going to back up a moment to that study that was done by the hospital after the new board members came on. It was in early last year, I guess. The conclusion was the hospital did better than its peers, fewer deaths and shorter stays by patients than most other facilities in Florida and nationwide. But there were some recommendations that came out of that study, and most of it had to do with trying to maybe come up with better systems for Zooming, for having people, families of those who were COVID victims be able to communicate with their loved one, and aftercare, a few little things that they wanted to improve upon. All right, back to the election. So we have 4 seats. Some of the seats are at large, and some of them are they're actually districted seats, but all electors get to vote on them. Unlike our county commission, which now you can only vote on once every 4 years on the commissioner in your district. But they have to. But those, other than the at-large ones, they have to live in a certain area. But again, they're elected by each of us. So seat 1 is at-large, and that's occupied now by Sharon Wetzler DePeters. She's the incumbent, and she's a Republican. She's being challenged by a woman named Tamsin Rosenwasser. She's a Republican, and she's identified herself as a medical freedom candidate. And then there's Alan Jerome Sprentz, who's a Democrat. So those 3 are up for that seat. And then at-large seat number 2, there are 4 candidates. Kendra Becca Musante is the medical freedom candidate. And she's challenging Kevin Cooper, who's a Republican. Kevin used to be the president of the Chamber of Commerce. He now is an official at Moat Marine Laboratory. And then Stephen Gufante is, he has not identified himself as a medical freedom person, but he is a critic of the hospital. And I saw an article in the paper last Friday that said he's a medical freedom advocate. I don't know if that's accurate or fair, whatever. And then there's a Democrat, John Lutz, is running. So there are 4 candidates in there, but the Republicans will be determined in that primary. There's 3, so whoever gets the most votes in that primary will have that, will go up against Mr. Lutz in the primary. And then there's an at-large seat, number 3. Pam Beitlich is running. Pam is currently working for the hospital. She's in charge of the women and children's programs at the hospital, but she's retiring, I think, next month. And so she's running for that office as a Republican. And then George Davis is a Democrat running for that same seat. And then Mary Flynn O'Neill is a medical freedom candidate, and she happens to be the sister of General Michael Flynn, that I think a lot of you may have read about. Now, let me stop there for a moment. The medical freedom people are quite upfront about how they, the programs they want to institute. One of the things they've been tagged with is a desire to privatize the hospital. In my research, I've not been able to substantiate that as being a plank of theirs. General Flynn, whose sister's running, he did tweet that the hospital ought to be privatized, but I don't know if we attribute that to his sister. But so I just want to be upfront about that. And then George Davis, I mentioned George Davis as a Democrat running for that same seat. That's seat 3. The last seat is seat 1. There are only 2 candidates in there. Sarah Lodge, and she is the current chair of the hospital board. She's a Republican, and she's being challenged by Tanva Marie Purus, who is a medical freedom person. So you've got a lot of choices, and it'll be interesting to see how the primary shakes out too, because I could see, you know, so if you're a medical freedom person yourself, you know who to vote for. I've told you who those people are. If you're not, it's going to be interesting to see if one of those people wins the Republican primary, whether there will be any Republicans who are not supportive of the medical freedom going over and voting for the Democrat. So it's going to be an interesting puzzle to figure out, and we won't know until the election night, I suppose. But I guess that's about all I have to share with you, but I just want to let you know how proud I am and how proud I think you should be of your hospital. Regardless of its governance, or maybe because of its governance, it has sure done a good job treating us looking after our health care needs. Is it time? I have time for questions. I may not have answers, but I got some time.
Mr. Bailey, WSLR News, my name is Johannes Warner. I wanted to get a response from Mr. Bailey, not the attorney who is representing the hospital. Assuming the medical freedom slate will have the majority of the board in November, how concerned are you about the institutional consequence for the hospital? Are there specific areas that you would be concerned about, and why? I'm asking that because I don't know a lot of programs they would actually want to implement. I know what they don't want. They don't want mask mandates, vaccination mandates, and so on. So what would be particular areas of concern the institution, Sarasota Memorial Hospital?
Actually, most of the concerns that they had are sort of history, past history now, because mercifully, we have the pandemic behind us. I think my assessment is that the difficulty we've had is that the board is a bit divided right now, and it's important for any collegial body to be marching in the same direction. So I don't want to judge any of the three people who are on there now. If they had three more or a couple more, maybe if it was all of that belief, then maybe it would be, they'd at least be marching in the same direction. I think it's just been difficult for the board to focus on its long-range planning, capital planning, because for a while they had large numbers of people showing up and consuming, you know, a couple of hours of their meetings. I've been to a lot of hospital meetings. I found them, how should I say this, a little tedious. A lot of numbers, and so to have it become contentious has been a bit of a problem. And so I don't know. I think if these folks were elected, maybe they'd all be, you know, in lockstep together, marching in a direction. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't. Most of this is secondhand for me anyway. I've been away from board meetings certainly since that election. I really haven't been to one in about 12 years, and that was intentional on my part. But as a matter of fact, when I was a hospital attorney, their meetings coincided with airport meetings, so I had to sometimes be two places at once. And so I don't know what would be. It would be desirable for that board to be of like mind. I mean, you'd like to have some diversity of opinion, to be sure, but you'd like them to be, you know, collegial with one another, and so.
I would like to know if it would be beneficial for somebody who's a Democrat or an independent to change their affiliation to the Republican statute. So be more like Carrie Seidman said in the Sunday paper, so that we can vote as a Republican and not allow this other group that's with Flynn to take over the hospital board?
Yes, I read Carrie's column on that too. Yes, that is a possibility, and that's one way that you could have your vote count earlier, certainly, than the general election. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We've heard what a wonderful institution that is, and I've lived here a long time, not as long as you, and I've certainly been there many times. And there are many elders here who just moved here to make sure they're near that hospital. What would privatizing this hospital mean? I mean, kill the golden goose? Yes, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah. But tell me.
Well, that is something I can express an opinion on because I've seen it. I was talking to a doctor. Again, there's medical freedom people. I saw their website. They said, we are not for privatization. At least two of them that were, I think it was early on, I want to make it clear they're not for privatization. And I'm glad to hear that because what you saw happen in Venice that I described to you a little bit earlier, that was it wasn't a public hospital, but it was a nonprofit hospital for many years. And the quality of care went down, the level of service and that sort of thing went down. One of the benefits of a public hospital is they don't pay taxes, ad valorem taxes. Another benefit is they get to collect taxes. So they can make, and they basically use their, Sarasota Memorial can levy 2 mills. They generally only levy 1 mill, and they use it for indigent care. So I can't really think of any advantage to privatizing, but you may remember that Governor Scott, now Senator Scott, when he was governor, he was urging privatization of public hospitals, and he got legislation passed requiring all the public hospitals to do a self-assessment to see whether it would benefit them to be privatized. And of course, all of them had to do it, and all of them concluded, no, it wouldn't benefit us to be privatized. A little bit self-serving, I might say, but no, that was the conclusion. So I don't think there would be any benefit in privatizing.
Mr. Bailey, my concerns are broader than just the hospital. I've looked into this situation at some depth, and I've gained some knowledge about the circumstances under which this insurgent group came in. And one of the bottom lines is that they are far less competent, far less knowledgeable about medical care and the management of a hospital or any other medical institution than the present management. And it's a problem that extends beyond the hospital. We've seen it in this city for some years now with some friends of this group, Mayor Flynn and his adherents, thinking that they're better at running the place than the vast majority of the people here who have been doing a pretty damn good job for 50 years, as you have. And since you have been involved for 50 years in a slew of civic organizations deeply engaged in making the city better, I think you're kind of an ideal person to tell us how we can bring the knowledge of this community back to a better understanding of civic responsibilities so that we can put away some of these people who show up, like, for example, Vic Rowe, I'm told, was asked to come on the board like a week or two before the election by this fellow Gufanti. And Gufanti's main reason for being on the board is that he was irate at the way he was treated for his COVID illness, rightly or wrongly. This is not the way to run a railroad or a hospital or any other institution of major significance to the community. So in that connection, I see that you've been involved, for example, in creating an institution called SCOPE, Sarasota County Power something, 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 which maybe have some relevance in this sector or not, but perhaps you could give us your thoughts on this general, broader question.
The voters are smarter than a lot of people think. They can get some good people elected, And then there'll be some people that you're not very happy with. Back in the day, the Sarasota Herald Tribune was extremely influential in this community. And they, their editorial board met with candidates for every office and made recommendations. And they were pretty much on the mark. Very helpful in educating the people. Now for the high-profile offices like sheriff, county commissioner, city commissioner, people kind of figure things out and don't have to rely as heavily upon some other independent recommending body like the Herald Tribune or like the Civic League. The Sarasota County Civic League was an organization I was involved in. We used to rate interview candidates, make recommendations. So there are still some organizations in town, you know, the firefighters and some others that make recommendations. So I think it just needs a group of people who will take the time to sit down with the candidates, interview all of them objectively, and make recommendations that the voters can follow. For offices that are less well known, the airport authority used to be elected. And we had some very difficult people that were elected to that board. I mean, they came there to fight over just darn near anything. And about 24 years ago, we were able to get the legislature. I say we, some friends of the airport were able to get the legislature to change it to where it was an appointed board, appointed by the governor. So the governor appoints airport board members, and they happen to be people who are business people, and they're running their own businesses, they are too busy to micromanage the airport, and so that's worked out very well. I'm not saying every position ought to be appointed, but those that are a little lower profile than the big ones, the constitutional officers, maybe they should all be appointed. I don't know, but I think the voters, generally speaking, can figure things out. I think for those people who are alarmed at what happened at the hospital last election, or alarmed at what happened at school board last election, they're going to be paying attention this time. And if they don't support that, then they'll make their voice heard at the polls.
Well, I always thought that the Memorial Hospital system was amazing, and you certainly reaffirmed that. I want to echo to the words you used, insurgent. It seems I've been an outsider to Sarasota until recently, and I've seen our education system, our healthcare system, and county governance itself all done as a nonpartisan exercise advanced toward increasing excellence in service. And I think that the insurgents are ideological. They care much more about advancing a specific self-serving ideology than providing the service that built the reputation for excellence. I'd like to think that the voters are informed as well, but I find it confusing. I think that the insurgents should be somehow tagged for exactly what they are, like a red box on every billboard. These are the people who wish to dismantle our community's tradition of excellence. And that way you go to the polls knowing whether you're voting for somebody that is sustaining the momentum or wishes to undo that momentum for some self-fulfilling ideological cause. So if, to the extent that you can help that happen, we need your wisdom toward that end.
Well, I think the voters will figure things out. And again, there are going to be people who support that point of view. And that's the way it is. Yep.
Okay, that's it. Dan, thank you so much. I think most of us in here have had experience with, you get in here, with that facility, and Now I know why it's in such good hands. So thanks you for your information.
Yeah.
Thanks for enlightening us. Let's give Dan another big hand, you guys.
Thank you.
And don't forget the walking group every Saturday, 6:30 at Williams Parker. Come in the back.
Tell that to yourself.
Okay. All right. We're through here. Meeting adjourned.